Okay, today we'll be talking about World War II, rise of dictators, kind of going along with our theme here of the interwar years of, what happened after World War One, and then in between, World War One and World War Two. On Classroom, I put some stuff on there about the Great Depression, the rise of totalitarianism, but now let's talk about the rise of these dictators. Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, and also Emperor Hirohito. Now, because we're not in the classroom and we're doing, a screencast recording here, I might be going a little bit quicker than I normally would in the classroom, but you can kind of take it at your own pace. You can pause it whenever you want to kind of write some stuff down, highlight whatever you want. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get started here. Maybe. Okay. So background again, the treaty that ended World War One. Again, the Treaty of Versailles. We talked about with the big four countries meeting to decide what's going to happen at the end of World War One. How is Germany going to be punished? And then economic depression that followed will contribute to the rise of dictatorships here in Europe and in Asia. And if we take a look at this map here, you can see the countries in purple, okay, here in Europe are all underneath some type of dictatorship. You can see Germany, Poland, Romania, Yugoslavia, Italy, Spain, Portugal, all these countries. In pink, you have France, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, and Norway. Those are democracies that were dismantled by dictatorships between 1938 and 1940. So countries that used to be democracies, now they're in control by some type of dictatorship. So the only remaining democracies in Europe in the year of 1940, right here, you can see here Ireland, okay, Great Britain, you have Sweden, and then Finland as well. So again, most of Europe is underneath some type of dictatorship. Now, the first dictatorship to rise in Europe will be Italy and underneath the leadership of Benito Mussolini. Now, the reason why Mussolini is going to take power is one, Italy did not get the land they wanted after World War One. Remember when we talked about the Treaty of Versailles way back before, spring break and all of this COVID stuff? We talked about the results of the treaty. I gave you the acronym BRAT. Remember, Germany had to accept blame. They had to pay reparations to the countries that were damaged. They had to reduce their army, and then finally they had to give back territory that they had gained. Now, Italy thought they were going to be gaining territory from this treaty. However, that was not the case. They were not getting the land that they wanted after that treaty. So people are looking for someone to save them. In steps Benito Mussolini in 1919, who is the founder of Italy's fascist party. Now, for the next couple slides, we're talking about fascism, and I don't know if we'll be back to school in May or not, but whatever. Our main focus for the test would have been, what is fascism? What are some characteristics of a fascist nation? So that's one of the main key points I want you to get out of this lecture here. So fascism, again, is an aggressive form of nationalism. So take a look at what are some characteristics of a fascist nation. First and foremost, again, the definition itself is just aggressive nationalism. Okay, so you have powerful nationalism, where the nation comes first no matter what. You have powerful and continuing nationalism, where you use constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols. Uh, Flags are seen everywhere. And I kind of want to make a note here that in order to be a fascist nation, you're going to have multiple of, we're going to be talking about 13 different characteristics. Okay, so just because, you see flags everywhere in the country, I am not saying that that is a fascist nation. That is completely false. But when all of these characteristics we're going to look at begin to add up, well, then you might be looking at a fascist nation. Okay, so kind of take this part right here, flags seen everywhere, with a grain of salt. Two, you have disdain and hatred for recognition of human rights. So giving up human rights for the country's need to protect the nation, whether it be your right to privacy, your right to, freedom of speech, freedom of press, whatever they can do to protect the nation, they are going to do. So people will look the other way, or the government will even approve of torture, whether it be summary executions, whether it be people that were simply disobeying. We have political opponents, okay, that were going against leadership. You have long incarcerations, whether it be for a simple petty crime. You might see a long prison sentence for that, and then also obviously assassination as well. Now, in order for everyone to be unified, You need the identification of an enemy or a scapegoat to kind of unify the masses here. So the people will be rallied into a frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe. Now, if we take a look at Germany, okay, we all should know at this point that scapegoat is going to be the Jews. Okay, so again, it gives everyone someone to blame, which allows them to, I guess, unify, as a whole, which is what the government wants them to do, unify around this so-called enemy or this scapegoat. You'll also see supremacy of the military. You'll see that whether it be military parades or your country's leaders talking about military power, trying to show off their military power whenever possible. Again, as a dictator, more often than not, you might not have elections, and if you do have elections, they are probably rigged. So, if you do not have the backing of the military, you have no power. We saw the Russian Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution, when Tsar Nicholas II lost his military, he at that point, lost his power. The military no longer backed him. He had nothing he could do. At that point, he had to go and hide. So same thing here. You have supremacy of the military, trying to show how powerful your military is. And you can see here on these photos, Nazi military parades, which will kind of show you a video later on about one of those too. You also might see extreme sexism, where especially during this time period, the government is usually male dominated. Things like divorce, abortion, homosexuality are usually oppressed or suppressed, by the government. One of the most important parts for any type of dictatorship, whether it be a fascist nation or not, is controlling the media. It's like today, obviously, you control the internet and what you can see in the internet, what type of sites you can access, all of that stuff, your social media, all of that. But obviously, back here in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, internet wasn't a thing. So controlling the radio, controlling newspapers, magazines are controlled. Oftentimes, you would have a government official that would work in, whether it be the newspaper company, they would be the editor. Anything you wanted to publish had to be approved by a government official first. Textbooks would be written to glorify the state. If you take a look at this photo or this image right here, this comes from a German textbook, a German, I should say, fourth, fifth grade textbook. It says the German students fight for the Führer and the people. And you can see them doing the Heil Hitler right there. And again, that's in a children's textbook. In the textbooks, you're going to have positive viewpoints about the government as well. So, for example, if you're to take a look at, a textbook during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, our textbooks, they might make the Soviet Union look like the bad guys or the enemies, whereas the Soviet Union will be vice versa. Okay, and that's what you're going to kind of see here too, with different textbooks and what they control, what they are allowed to learn at school. You also have obsession with national security. Fear is a motivational tool where people are constantly told that they are in danger simply so the masses will obey. If you feel like you are in constant threat of attack or constant danger, you might be willing to give up some of your rights for the government in order to protect you. You also have organized violence to suppress opposition as well. Anybody that were to oppose, whether it be the government's regime, again, talk negatively about the government, usually was going to be punished. Okay, so again, trying to keep everything in-house, if at all possible. Now, religion and government would sometimes be intertwined. You're going to see this in Nazi Germany and also fascist Italy as well. Fascist governments tend to use the most common religion, okay, in the nation to help manipulate the public opinion. The reason is because if you are messing with people's belief systems, something that people believe strongly in down to their core. For example, I'm just going to throw this out. If the church, or the Catholic Church in Nazi Germany were to support, the Nazi leadership, well, then because your church does, then maybe you would support it too. Okay, so again, they want the church to be on their side, and oftentimes the church would even be bribed by government money. Now, rich businessmen and fascist leaders would work together, and one of the main reasons for this is because they don't want to see people to turn to communism. Labor power would also be suppressed, where labor unions are eliminated. Remember, unions fight for workers' rights. We talked about this during our Industrial Revolution unit. Obviously, if you're a government and you want people working overtime, you're almost going to be using kind of like slave labor. So therefore, you don't want anybody fighting for the hours that they're working, the pay that they're working, okay, the working conditions, none of that. So labor unions would be eliminated. And then obviously because you have fascist leaders, working with the businessmen, businesses don't want the country to turn to communism because, again, if it turns to communism, these private owned companies would no longer own that company. Okay, so therefore they are going to even supply or help support the fascist leader. A lot of business leaders in Germany are actually going to fund Hitler's campaign so the country does not turn to communism because that would mean less money in their pocket. Educated people in the arts are usually hated. You have open hostility to anybody that has a high education, whether it be a professor, a college student, whatever. Uh, Professors would usually be censored and then arrested if their curriculum was going against what the government wanted them to teach. Free expression was no longer allowed in arts and writing because, again, you don't want anything to go against what the government is trying to tell you. And these educated people, they're not simply going to fall in line and do what the government's going to say. They kind of get the bigger picture and they know what's going on. Okay, so educated people would usually be suppressed. And if you did not follow along with the government's curriculum, then punishments are usually handed down, and those were usually harsh punishments. You also see cronyism and corruption. Fascist leaders would put their friends and their relatives in high government positions, even if they, had no experience with that government position prior to this. Again, trying to keep everything in house. Usually surround yourself with what would be called, yes men, people that are going to do whatever you say, no matter what. They're not really going to question it. Now, if there were elections, they would usually be a complete sham. They would be manipulated by whether it be assassination of opposing candidates. Again, that's the most extreme part there, but you'd see smear campaigns where you're going to try to tarnish the other official that's running against you. And then obviously, if there was an election in a fascist nation, more often than not, there would be a rigged election where your vote, they say you get to vote, but really your vote does not matter anyway. Now, okay, those are all the characteristics of a fascist nation. So let's talk about, once Benito Mussolini gets into control, what's going to happen. So the fascists believe the nation, again, is more important than the individual. And you determine how great your nation is by expanding your military and then expanding your territory. Fascists were anti-communist, which made the Catholic Church and obviously businesses support them, which we just talked about. Benito Mussolini himself was backed by his black shirt militia, which you can see an example of right here, holding a sign that says "O Roma or Morte," which just means Rome or death. And what Benito Mussolini wants to do is he wants to create the greater Roman Empire. If you take my ancient civ class, we talked about the Roman Empire and how they're able to expand. Benito Mussolini wants to recreate that again here in the 20th century. Now, we talked about the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, again, where Vladimir Lenin's going to come in and lead this revolution, a communist revolution, to take over Russia. And again, once he does that, the Russian territories are renamed the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in 1922. They will be the USSR or the Soviet Union until their fall in 1991. And the communists will set up a one-party rule. Okay, so there are no other political parties, just communism. If you are a political opponent or you have different political affiliations, more often than not, you'd be sent to a gulag or you'd just be killed. Following Lenin's death in 1924, there are basically going to be two guys that are fighting for power, and that's Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky. Joseph Stalin will become the new Soviet dictator, and in 1927, he begins what's called his 5-year plans. And these 5-year plans are a massive effort to industrialize the country. Now, if we remember back to the Russian Revolution, remember how Russia was really behind when it came to the industrialization. Remember, a lot of their soldiers didn't have enough weapons. They had to pick up weapons off of a dead soldier. So Stalin wants to bring them to the forefront and make them, industrialized like the rest of the Western world. So as a result, millions of Russians will either be executed or they'll die from collectivization. Stalin's actually responsible for more deaths than Adolf Hitler is. And a lot of that could be from his collectivization and his gulag camps as well. Many political opponents would be purged and or executed. Hey, I'm going to stop it there for right now because I only have a 15-minute limit on here. So I will pause this one and then we'll pick up right where we left off with video 2.